Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I made this audio that I was going to put in the Journey series, and then also put in a separate video on Gratefulness Meditation channel. And um, I ended up talking about things in the video that I think are important to support the original 30-minute audio. Some of it's politics, some of it's me making fun of stuff that I wouldn't usually put in the Gratefulness Meditation channel. I don't want to do too much mocking, and I want to have a place where it's just more of the higher stuff. But there's enough in there. Some interesting things about World War III. I read a couple of Whispers messages, but it's about the importance of a relationship with God, connecting with God, these types of things. And so I'm just gonna put the whole video in here in the Journey series and in the Gratefulness Meditation. We have a playlist where there's these essential videos that is about the philosophy and other things of the system. What it's about is listening to God. And so here's the video. I think that's pretty much the explanation of it. And here's the video here. Greetings, brothers and sisters. I have something. If this was done by people, it's a very simple thing. Anybody can do it. It is more about effort than anything else, and willingness. More about willingness. Not even really effort, but willingness. But it's a very simple thing to do. I would say easy, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But it is, in a sense, easy to do. And it would help people in their individual lives, individual decision making, alleviating so many self-inflicted problems, so many of the things that we think about human stupidity and whatever else that humans do that we, avoidable mistakes and things like this. And I'm going to say what it is in just a moment. But once I say it, people will dismiss it. And they'll dismiss it because they're not going to want to do it. That's the thing. It's it's like one of the tragedies of human life. This is coming out of. I want to say that I'm going to make this. This is going to be a standalone video on the Gratefulness Meditation channel as well as the Journey series. And in the introduction to this video, it's going to flow into a great clip I saw on Fox News last night, a promo for Fox, a Trump thing. And it comes from a comment somebody left. Like somebody sent me a meme, and they said something about it's me trying to find my spiritual path. And finding your spiritual path is the easiest thing. But this technique is, again, it's not going to be some oh, wow, this is some new thing I heard, or maybe you haven't heard it or heard it said this way. But it's like the simplest thing, right? The technique is asking God. You just ask God in a sincere way, and then you listen to the answer. You want to hear the answer from God. You don't ask God in some superficial way and then block the answer, block your ability to hear the answer, and not want to hear the answer. And anybody can ask God anything. God exists inside of you. And so you can ask God about anything, and sincerely ask God. The best way to do it, the best way, and this is in a way a praying, but it's something more than prayer. It's a communication. Praying is asking God for something and hoping that God delivers. But this is actually communicating with God and asking God, the divinity within you, for an answer, and then waiting for the answer, and then also asking God for you to understand the answer. When you really want the answer, you really got to want it, and it's, then you'll bypass any of the issues you have with communicating with God, like your own personal grossness, your own ego, the inability to stop and not hear what God's saying because you can't settle down your mind. Your mind's out of control. You got too much distractions, too much. You close your eyes and there's just all this noise, and there's all these things going on, and you can't focus. I mean, just why people have trouble meditating and things like this. But you're asking God to help you, to find a way to get the answer to you, and help you, see the answer for what it is. And the best way to do this is like with tears in your eyes, being in a state of desperation when you're like completely lost and broken down and helpless, and you're begging God for some, something. Not even like for a specific thing. You just need help. Like you can't go on, and that's the best time to communicate to God, because you got nothing left. You're just wiped out. You're just assed out. Like you got nothing to. You're desperate. But even without being in that state, you can communicate with God about anything. You just have to be willing and really want God's answer. You want God's input, and that's why people won't do it, right? Because people don't want God's input. That's the fucking whole problem of humanity. People, again, I don't know how many people are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to try this." And I'll go into the technique more, just things about it. But when you open a communication line to God, God's going to tell you things you don't want to hear, right? Most times people want to do something, right? Let's say, like just the example of this big, beautiful bill that's some kind of nightmare pre-apocalyptic bill that Trump is passing through. And, whatever's in there, there's multiple people that, it's a well-written, well-crafted bill that's probably written before Trump's presidency. Whatever the agenda is for the bill, like to turn America into a more controlled dystopian, rich, favoring the rich more than wealth and privilege more than it is now. All the things that the ChatGPT said to that girl. I made a video where the girl asked, put the whole bill in, and ChatGPT said this is some kind of dystopian nightmare scenario, legislation. And all the people who are involved in it, right? All the people who participated in creation of the bill, right? And, you could say something on the other side. All the people who knew Joe Biden was senile. They knew that he had some sort of dementia. Like all the people that were in power, all the media people, all the people that were, had influence over it. And they just made the willful choice to ignore and lie about it, right? And so these are just, you could cover any political issue. Like it's just at any particular time. Creating the atomic bomb, or stuff with AI. My wife just came in, and she was going out, and she said that the guy who created AI, the guy who was like the sort of inventor of AI, had said that he warned everybody to stop. Like we should stop. We should not do this. And of course they're going to do it, right? Like there's just no stopping. And you see it in people's lives, and you see it, maybe in your own situation after you've done the thing. And you're hell-bound to do something. You just want to do it. And everyone else knows it's a mistake. Everyone else knows you're being impulsive, or you're doing something that, is going to lead to ruin. And it's like, somebody in a relationship with a much younger like Bill Belichick dating that's, Bill Belichick's 70 years old, the football coach, and he's dating some girl that's like 25 or something. And everybody warning you, and everybody, she turns out to be a real nightmare. Of course, she has like weird, whatever it is. And you just want to do what you want to do. Your ego just wants to do what it wants to do. And so people don't ask God because they know what the answer is going to be. I mean, most time people would ask God when they're about to make a mistake. If they ask God before the question's even, fully constructed as a thought, like like so you close your eyes, you're praying, you're meditating, whatever you're doing to connect to God, and you're asking God the question before the question's even out of your, even fully formed, the answer, because the answer, because otherwise you wouldn't have to ask God about it, right? Like the answer, you just don't want to hear it. And that's the problem with human beings. Their egos are doing things all the time that they know are wrong. And so they don't want to include God. And it's more than just their actions. It's more than just humanity's individual actions. It's also who they are, what you are as a person, your intentions, and what your life's all about, what you're doing, your movement, that you're behind, whatever thing that you think is so make America great again bullshit, or the gender stuff that was pushed by any of these things. Your belief system is so fucking whack that you don't want to hear the answer. This is a great thing Master Charji said about Christians, and this doesn't apply to just Christians. I mean, it's everybody. But I mean, specifically to the Christian religion, is they want the Son because they don't want to connect with the Father, right? It's like you're scared of your boss, so you go talk to your boss's son. Your boss's son is more congenial, or more nicer, and you're scared of your boss, so you ask your boss' son to go talk to your boss for you, right? Something like that. And so don't want direct connection to God, so you go through the Son. The Son is less intimidating, right? And people are intimidated by God. They're afraid of what God's going to tell them because, another thing the Chargy said was, rich people don't pray because when you pray, your heart opens up, and you look around, you can see all the things you do with your money. If you're a billionaire and you start praying, you're like, holy shit, I could actually help all these people. If you open up to God, but these people want to hoard their wealth. They don't want to, they don't want to open up their hearts and do something, that would benefit everybody. They could, there's so much wealth out there that could do so much good for so many people. And I'm not talking about just like handouts. I'm talking about like doing things to, job creation or any number of things they could do that would help the environment, help other people. I mean, all these things. But they don't want to do it, and so they don't connect to God. Because once they connect to God, then they're like, actually, I could actually be doing some good with the, this wealth I've hoarded, right? Or people in power. They just are hell-bent wanting to do what they want to do. And so, there's lots of bad ideas that people have every day, every moment. A lot of compulsions, a lot of things they want to do, and they don't want to be talked out of it. And everyone in their life is warning them and says they got plenty of feedback, don't do this. And they're getting warnings by God. They're getting warnings by their soul, right? And they're doing it anyway because they just want to fucking do wrong. Like their ego just wants to do what it wants to do. And so they just, there's no wanting to connect to God. They don't want that relationship. Because once that relationship's there, your decisions are always so easy. Like I've been doing this for a while with the meditation I do, and it works on your heart, and whatever it is, and God shows me, it tells me what to do in one way or another. I mean, before it's not even like it's an automatic process, and oftentimes it's not what I want to do. I mean, it's sometimes it's like a burden. Sometimes it's just, oh man, do I got to do that? Kind of thing. And my ego doesn't really want to do it, but I know better because I know that I'm going to have to do it one way or another. Like it's just a matter of time. If your soul wants you to do something, it's just there in front of you to do. It's like I've talked about some scars before, but also, it's just what you're supposed to do. Like you can avoid it, but I mean, I'm talking about over lifetimes. Like it's the sooner you get it over with, the better. And oftentimes when you do, you're like, oh wow, this is great. I wish I had done it before. I wish I had went through this before. The benefits is something even really unpleasant, right? Is, the benefits are always there because if you do what God wants you to do or what your soul wants you to do, there's just, there's a feeling of well-being that just comes with it. But if you're doing things that God doesn't want you to do, there's a feeling of dread. Like you're dreading something, like you're like some foreboding, something bad's going to happen. Because you're doing wrong. You're waiting for the consequences for your wrong action. You're alone too. You're doing it on your own. You're off the farm. You're doing it without God. You do things with God, and it goes great because God is there with you, and you're feeling you're on your soul's path, and so it's just it's a totally better feeling. You don't feel some kind of like, oh, well, I wonder what's going to happen to me for doing this bad thing. You're not worried, and or just it's not even like something that's like some like criminal act or something, but like just knowing you're doing things that aren't that you shouldn't be doing, and thinking and process planning things that you shouldn't be planning, and and then the reward or the feeling that you get from it is bad, like it's guilt and all the things that go with it, like just muddling through your life, whatever it is, toiling, making the same mistakes over and over again, thinking that this is going to be great. It's like I remember, when I used to, get drunk and party and looking forward to going out and going to bars or parties or whatever it was. And then being there like, oh my God, it sucks. And, the alcohol was I never really liked to drink or drugs, and you have the negative effect. And, they're depressants, and, you're going to wake up with a hangover, and it's just hurting your body. And you're like, this thing, but you look forward to it. You think this was going to be fun. It was going to be great. And, people go to Vegas and they're like, oh, this is going to be, and they blow a bunch of money and they do a bunch of fucking whatever it is, bad decision, hedonistic kind of shit. And then they go home and it's like, all right, let's not tell anybody about that. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas because, it's ungodly, right? Like, don't let anybody see this, right? Don't let anybody, we don't want anybody to know about what we did there. Well, then, you knew that ahead of time. So there's various ways to do this, but the specific way to find your spiritual path, the specific way to find your, the right technique, the right people, the right guide, the right system, is you ask God for 7 days before you go to bed. Because you might be told in a dream, there's something that happens right before you go to bed because you're about to go into a state where you're not controlling anything. When you're asleep, your dreams, you can't control. When that's the way where communication happens. There's divine beings, you have a spiritual support team, and your soul, they can show you things in dreams and, process things that, that your mind won't let happen when it's awake. Like you have like safety guards, I don't want to call them safety because it's not, the denial guards. Like you have these things that are denial based, that are there, that are protecting you from seeing the truth. It's why people will willfully not allow the truth to come in, no matter how much feedback they get. It's like when you're talking to a sheeple, and like you have all this evidence and you have all this information, and it just won't sink in. You're talking to a Trumper, you're talking to a liberal, you're talking to somebody who they just think they know, and you can see like how much they're wrong about everything, and you try to communicate it, and it's just there's all these guardrails, there's all these defense mechanisms, but those things go down when you go to sleep. And so in a sincere way, if there's tears in your eyes, even better, with this idea that you really want feedback from God, with the soul, and its divinity's within you, so you're not going anywhere, it's there, like it's bubbling up inside of you. You're suppressing the answer, like the answer's already there. You just you're doing all this thing to avoid the answer, and you want to do what you want to do. And so, but if you're doing this to find your spiritual path, then you pray to God every night for 7 nights. I mean, it usually doesn't, like I said, take this long, but you do it in this way. And you also pray to, you have this idea that, please help me see the answer, and also give me the ability to accept and embrace the answer. Like it's just all these ideas, like, and really feel that, like you got to feel it. And it's, it's only hard because, your ego doesn't want to give up control. Like other than that, it's easy because, like I said, the answer's there, divinity's within you. And so, his clarity is there, and you pray every night, right, about it. Like this is something, the second master of Sahaj Marg system did, because somebody said, I want to find the right spiritual path. And he wasn't going to say, well, you're here with me, and this is probably the right spiritual path for you, right? You can't say that. You don't want to say it. You don't want to tell people what to do, and people want you to. Like, so that's a trap that people set, because they want you to tell them what to do, so when it goes shitty, they can blame you. Why did you tell me to do this thing, right? And so, the Sahaj Marg system, you don't give people advice, because oftentimes, and even if you give them advice and they don't follow the advice, they still end up blaming you. Oh, you knew about this thing and you told me and I didn't do it, but it's your fault somehow, right? And so, like, it's just, people have to come up with it on their own. So they have to take responsibility. Otherwise, they won't take responsibility. If you tell people what to do, you pressure them, you order them to do it, and then it's on you. Then they don't have any, they're not to blame for it. People like to be forced what to do, and, whatever, even if it's the right thing. And then if it's, there's some problems or issues, it's not their responsibility. And so Babaji said, pray every night to, this technique, to send you the right person, the right system. And the guy came back in 7 days and said, I did what you told me to do, and it didn't work because every time I did it, I just saw your face. He was praying to find somebody to, like in India, they have this guru thing. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe you should, like, maybe that you got your answer. So he got the answer and he couldn't even process it or understand it. And, he's in denial of it. Like, people don't want the real answer. They don't want God's answer. And so you pray to it. I had a viewer, and we were talking about Jesus, about something, right? And the person was lecturing me probably about what I was doing meditation-wise and telling me why I was like going to hell and all that stuff. This is back when I said, go back and forth with people. And I said, and in my belief system, in the Sahaj Marg system, Jesus interacted with the second master of the system and turned over Christianity to him. Like, Jesus plays a part in the Sahaj Marg system. He's one of the, the divine beings that is there, participating in the system. He's in charge of one of the spiritual points, the second point, the soul point. And so, my thought for all Christians, and you can't say this to them. I mean, I'm saying this now here, but I'm not really saying it to Christians. I'm just saying this is, what I know to be the truth. That if they were really Christians, they would be here. Like, if you wanted to connect to Jesus, the transmission, the cleaning help, and Jesus' soul is actually part of this. And if Jesus does reincarnate, which I think he is, maybe he has, maybe he's here now, or will be in the future, he'll be a part of this. He'll do this, meditation. He'll be a part of this system in some way, right? Maybe even a, master in the system or something. And so, this is all my understanding of it. And so, where the Christian religion, he's completely bummed about what was happened with it. And so the person is talking to me about all these things, and, we're having this communication, and I say, well, why don't you just ask Jesus? And I say it, like, the person shows back up maybe a month later, and I said, did you ask Jesus about this? And I keep on asking him, and finally he goes, yeah, I did ask Jesus, and Jesus said you were full of shit. What I was talking about Christianity in a way, like I do. And, there was a reverend, a guy who was a minister, and he was listening to my videos. And he said, like, your interpretation of the Bible and your understanding of Christianity is like mind-blowing. And it's not because of me, and, I'm not a biblical scholar, because I understand it from a spiritual perspective. And so I have an advantage because of doing the Sahaj Marg system. I mean, when I talk about Christianity, so many people know I'm speaking truth that it's hard for Christians to hear. I couldn't tell it to Christians, and I wouldn't want to, because they're not going to, they can't hear it. And, it's one of the Sahaj Marg principles that you don't criticize somebody's faith. I mean, if I was having a conversation with somebody, it's different. It's kind of what my job is here. And it's not really being critical. It's just, exposing the lies and the stuff that's anti-God and the whole problem with Christian religion. But you don't want to take away people's faith if that's the best they can do. Because some people can't do spirituality. They're just not equipped yet. It's going to take them some time to develop the capacity for that. And so they have to live a certain number of lives to be on the spiritual path. So if they're, doing a religion and the religion sucks, at least they're doing something. Like, if they're doing it sincerely or whatever, you can't rob them of their faith because they can't jump to the next level anyway. But what I was saying, my advantage here is Jesus left his religion behind and became a spiritual person. And a certain knowledge you have when you do that, then you can look at other teachings of other religions and religious figures, and you understand it because you're going through similar things. Once you leave the religion, like religion is a good thing to be born into, but a horrible thing to die in. That's a semi-quote, a quote, not a verbatim quote from Swami Vivekananda, the famous Indian saint. And what that means is religions give you the framework as a kid to, develop whatever you develop. They teach you sort of the basics of ideas of God, but it doesn't help you connect to God. And so you have to, as you get older, you have to leave the religion behind and become a spiritual person where you have a direct connection with God. And when you start having a spiritual life, you understand the lives of the great saints and the people And then, I mean, even my capacity of what I'm doing here has helped me understand what the masters of the Sahaj Marg system has gone through. Some of the things that because of the role I have to play, and then what I'm doing with Gratefullness meditation, it helped me understand, some of these things I wouldn't have had, if without these experiences, I wouldn't be able to understand. But like I have, a totally different understanding of biblical quotes and what's happened with Christianity because of those things, right? And I don't have some stake in it. It's not, I mean, I don't, there's no defense mechanism there. I had a good relationship with the Catholic religion. My mom had prayer meetings. I learned how to pray. My grandmother, my mom said the rosary for me and my siblings and all that, which benefited us, certainly me and my brother, who ended up finding a spiritual path later on in our lives. And, there's these nuns that used to come over our house, and prayer groups, and, people were, somewhat spiritual. My mom did these charismatic things, and, it helped, me and my journey. I mean, I went through a period where I, didn't think about God at all for the time I was like 14 to the time I was 28 for like 14 years or so. I thought about God a lot when I was a kid, and then didn't it, just I was using drugs and kind of being a punk or whatever it was, and all those things. But the answers are there, right? And so if you embrace the spiritual path, and then clarity starts to come in. Like if you do anything and practice it, you just get better at it. You open a line of communication with God, and there's crazy people they'll have inner voice, and it's some manifestation of their ego, some schism, some split personality thing. I mean, there's all these things, right? So, but to really be able to, the idea is that God will give you the answer, and you just got to wait for it and find a way to process it, and then you can develop different things. I mean, there are techniques in the Gratefullness meditation, Sahaj Marg meditation we do with cleaning, and but you meditate in the transmission, it makes it easier to communicate with God. It's a process, and getting rid of all the noise and all these things. And then, developing the capacity to know when the answer comes. And all these things can be done. It's just practice. It's a willingness, right? But you have on one side of the coin, you have your ego wants to do what it wants to do. So it's just going to say, yeah, I pray to God, and God told me to do this. I mean, oftentimes people say, yeah, I'm doing what God's work, and they're totally not doing God's work. They're doing what their ego wants them to do. I mean, hear from religious people all the time. And so, that's not, like, it's not real. It's not sincere. And so, there's that aspect. But then there's people who just like to beat the shit out of themselves. People just want to, there's that guy in the Da Vinci Code, Simon, I think the character's name. I didn't read the books, but in the movie. And he's hitting himself in the back with a whip, right? He beats himself with a whip, this religious bullshit where there's torment and torture and, diving into the whole crucifixion and the blood and the, all that stuff that they do. Stigmata, if you ever see that movie Stigmata, they have the stigmata. People have they start bleeding from their hands and they're fucking, it's just, like the martyr, right? Being a martyr in Christianity, fucking all that shit's bullshit. It's not like that. It's not like it has to be, oh my God, this is like God's telling me to do some horrible thing where, no, it's nothing like, you don't have to suffer. It's just listening to God and following your soul's path and developing this capacity. And it starts with a willingness to change and develop and not looking for some answer that's going to say beat the shit out of yourself or some answer that's going to say to go do the hedonistic thing you want to do. Know that you're lying to yourself, and then, that it becomes then you're praying to God just to help you, like, to be able to communicate. Like, you just open up it's like a language barrier, right? But God can communicate in any language because it's thought, right? And it's, it's love. And so, it can come in any seed form, and just the capacity to find the right answer. And like I said, praying before you go to bed for, 7 days, usually within 7 days, the answer will come, doing it sincerely. And if you have like real, a real desire, like, when you really want to do something, you're just locked in, just like, yeah, I really want the answer. Like, just please tell me. I tell me and help me, whatever I need to do or go through to get the answer, to be able to understand it and apply it. And I want to be able to apply it to my life. I want to be able to take the information I'm getting from you and act on it. And, just a willingness. It just takes a willingness. And all these things would disappear. All the bullshit would disappear. Because everyone would do things that were endorsed by God. Every decision you made, every act you do, every big decision, the path just unfolds in front of you, and you're like, all right, this is what God wants me to do. There's no ego. There's no, you can get into it, right? You can pump yourself up and get emotionally into it, but that's not really at the end of the day, it's not really all that necessary. It's being happy and grateful for what you have and what's given to you and what God wants you to do. And, thank you for this work. Thank you for this opportunity, whatever it is, with a sense of gratitude. That's why I say, and be grateful. Gratitude is always the key. And so it's just a willingness to look at things in that way, right? And get your ego giving up control. And if that happened, we'd have no problems. Like all the stuff I cover here, like all the fucking bullshit things that people are doing that goes against God's will. That's what I cover here. That's why I mock people. That's why I call people dumbasses, dumb fucks, whatever. That's because the willfully deluding oneself to believe in Trump or to follow a path that's, leading to ruin. And God's warned us, and, there's that. I mean, there's a part of it that's God's work from a sense that this system's demonic and has to be destroyed. In a way, Trump's doing God's work. Certainly, if that's, if the God's plan is to destroy America, then all these people are, they're all participating in that. So in a way, they're doing God's work, but not willfully. They're not connected to God. They're not open to God, and they're not wanting to get feedback from God. So, there it is. It's again, this will be a standalone video on the Gratefullness Meditation channel, and then it'll be in the Journey series, and then, of course, in this video as well. But, I doubt that people will do it because of all the reasons I've said. But hopefully, it's something that registers with people, and there's some sense of a movement in it, and it's there. Again, it's simple, and it would be easy if there was an overwhelming desire and resistance to do what you want to do, to disclude God from your decision-making. If that wasn't there, it would be really easy to do. And you'd be easier over time because anything you practice becomes, something that becomes automatic at some point, where you just know what God wants you to do, you're connected, and you just do it. Anyway, so that's, let's wrap this one up here. So, I get divine inspiration for these videos. Like, just this information just comes into me, like this whole thing, that whole 30-minute thing I just said. And some of it was like coming into me real time, like it was coming through me, was a better way to put it, in real time, right? There's a flow to it. But the ideas, the basic ideas were there. When I read that comment from somebody, or that post from somebody, there's just this, like it flipped a switch, and there was this, download of information, right? And so I knew I was going to make this voiceover today. So, but last night I turned on the news for some reason late at night, and I went through the various channels. I just was, I don't know what I was doing. I was waiting. I watched the basketball game. Maybe it was after that. It was after the basketball game. And Fox News ran this promo. I only saw the back half of it. And unfortunately, they don't have the thing in like a wide screen. They just have the short video. But it's not as good, but it's basically the same thing. And there's one point I want to show you here. So this is about Trump's surge.
The golden age of America begins right now.
It'll be the biggest political comeback in a century.
Well, that's a good-looking group. Hello, everybody.
He likes the good-looking groups.
This is not a normal situation, is it, huh?
We are in the presence of a really mythical character.
Yeah, he is. The mythical is Rambo.
Doing 4 of these in one day is a little difficult. This doesn't get me to heaven, nothing will.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. I saw it started right before the Sylvester Stallone thing, which is great. But they're praying over him, right? They are all putting their hands on him. And you don't need to do that. That's fucking stupid. So you don't need to touch people. Like they're, you know, what is God's prayers coming through your fucking hands? You know, you're praying on an abstract level. So this idea that you have to lay hands on somebody, you know, you can move energy with your hands. There's healing energy. There's people who can do Reiki. I mean, there's divine energy that comes through people. I'm not talking just about Reiki. Pranic healing is probably the best. My son took pranic healing classes. Prana is the more subtle energy. I think Reiki is something a little bit grosser, but still, you know, people have it works. You know, there's energetic healing, and you know, you don't have to put your hands on somebody to pray for them. You can pray for someone right now. We all could pray for Trump right now, right? But you know, that's not what I want to talk about. That's just the first piece. But him saying this, let's watch it again here.
To get me to heaven, nothing will.
If this won't get me to heaven, nothing will. So you're going to hell, bro? If anybody's going to hell, it's Trump, right? So, you know, I've said over and over again, I believe Trump's doing God's work. And, you know, maybe there's something inside of him that's, you know, there's higher developed souls, and I'm not saying Trump is one. But, you know, his charisma and the way he motivates people, the gifts that he has to get his followers to you know, his bullshit ability. He's a great bullshitter. You know, he's got charisma, all the things that he does to motivate the Trumpers is, you know, a God-given gift. And I don't think it's, he wants, you know, the divinity, the forces that are on the divine side of things. And again, divinity always wins because it's a rigged system. Like the devil and demons, you know, they can, freedom of choice is where they get their power from, right? When your ego, you know, your ego can hijack a life, but your life is finite. You know, you 80 years or whatever you got. And, you know, it takes you 40 years to become the asshole that you're supposed to become the demon you were supposed to become. Maybe, you know, 20 years to some people. But to really have power and leverage in the world, you know, it's only a 40-year thing, 40-year reign. Even someone like Queen Elizabeth, who again, you know, she's constrained by the firm and the powers that be that surround the royal throne. There's lots of things she's just basically told what to do. She got sworn in when she was, I don't know, 16, 17 or something like that as queen. And then she was queen for like, you know, 60, 70 years. I mean, she died when she was 90, whatever it was, right? And that's, you know, 70 years. Like, it's not that long a time when you look at the overall history. And so, you know, demonic energy and the demonic side of things, the egotistical side of things, you know, gets to own the earth for short periods of time, or gets to do bad shit and make bad decisions here, because that's part of it. Like there's a choice-based part of life, and people are going to make the wrong choices. People are going to lie, and people are going to cheat, and people are going to do shit, and you know, it only hurts them. And it isn't like they're going to usurp God. You know, I have these aliens called the Great Usurpers. You know, God can't be usurped, so you can't take God's place. You can't, you know, turn the universe on its axis. You can't make the universe in your image. You can, you know, do it in small places. You can do it in limited time periods. You can manipulate those things, but lies always get exposed. So, you know, divine forces are going to win out. And there's work that has to be done, sometimes destructive work. And there are forces here destroying America because it needs to be destroyed, destroying the global, you know, whatever we have here system, because there needs to be something better that happens that this system is blocking us from achieving. So I talk about that quite a bit. And so Trump is doing God's work to whatever extent, but it isn't like he's doing God's work intentionally. He doesn't ask God, you know, he's not thoughtful, first of all. You know, to do God's work, you got to be knowledgeable. Trump is just random and impulsive and selfish. He's so fucking selfish, right? And so this is a great moment because, you know, he's praying, but they're not really praying. And all these people are backing him. They can't see what the rest of us can see. That this is, you know, all this stuff, you know, it's unintentional divine work. where they're not trying to destroy the system, or maybe they are, like maybe they're not conscious of it. There are people who are conscious of it, who are seeing the need for it because the system is, can't provide for the promises. It can't promise, your promised lifestyle. It can't deliver on those promises. And so, the system has to be taken down. There has to be depopulation. There's no choice in the matter. It's a debt-based economic system. It has to, it's an illusionary demonic system that is based in lies and deception and debt. So, but anyways, this thing that he says, if this isn't going to get me to heaven, nothing will. You think this is going to absolve your fucking sins? Having these people put their fucking hands on your shoulder and you close your eyes and, God knows what he's thinking about when his eyes are closed, but it isn't God. A guy who he says the Bible's his favorite book, but he can't recite one Bible verse. He's not a religious person. I don't know if he believes in God or not, but he certainly doesn't, indicate it in any real way. If he has any sort of mental relationship with God, it's barely existent, right? If at all, probably not at all. And so, I saw this moment. It's just him catering to these people because he's got to get the evangelical Christians on his side. And they think he's God's instrument. Some people think he's a reincarnation of Jesus. Like they have this idea that he's a divine agent. And he's only a divine agent to destroy the system. And they can't deal with it because they're religious people and they're not spiritual people. And they are, when you come to God with, if you come to God with, I don't know what you would call it, with conditions, you're not, like I said, there's only unconditional love. There's no conditional love. If you come to God with conditions and saying, God, I'll be with you, but you got to do this for me or that for me. And we all do that to whatever extent. God, I can't take this. I'll do whatever you want, but just don't make me do this or don't put me through that or, I don't want to be crucified, whatever it is, right? Well, it's limited. Like you're not really a devotee. You have to be someone where you're like 100% whatever God does and wants. You're not going to get mad at God. You're not going to blame God. You're just going to accept and be grateful. And it's a hard thing to do, but it's easy. It's simple. It's just the ego gets in the way because we have what we want and what we have our conditions. And so all these people, their conditions is that somehow Trump is going to make America great again and that he's backed by Jesus and God, and it's just not true. And so, so that, I had this voiceover to do in the beginning, and then this stuff came in. And then another thing came in from Elon, which is also interesting. And then this thing from Pete Hegseth. So let's show you those two things, and I got more to cover here.
Doesn't get me to heaven, nothing will.
Art of the Surge, the Donald Trump Comeback Season 2. Streaming now only on Fox Nation. Plus, it's how the surge started.
How the surge started. Look, this bullshit thing. Like, the Christians who will not admit that this is WWE. And, a lot of this fucking, these riots and the National Guard shit, it looks totally WWE stuff. This is what Trump does. It's for dummies, right? It's for dumb fucks. So
started. Season 1 streaming now on Fox Nation.
Okay, so there's that. So let's go to the Elon Musk tweet. Okay, so Elon Musk, when I woke up, this is what Twitter recommended to me. Super important. Please do this so people know the truth about what's happening. And somebody, Doge designer, posted this and Elon reposted it. So, like, this is how much he's caved in the last couple of days.
A great solution for that, which is send them links to videos and information on the X platform. So if they say that, Trump loves Nazis, for example, like, well, actually, here's the whole speech where he categorically condemns Nazis.
Wait a minute. He did a whole speech categorically condemning Nazis? Now, first of all, this is like a straw man argument. Now, I know there's people on various social media platforms, and once in a while, some pundit or somebody will call Trump a Nazi lover or Nazi, but it's very, it's very rare. I mean, the president of Israel says Trump has been the greatest friend to Israel in the White House, and Trump gave, Trump's like got an obsession with his daughter Ivanka, and he gave her away to a Jewish guy to marry, and he gave them $2 billion and looted money. Right? There was a thing on MSNBC last night where Stephanie Rule had some guy on, and he was like, "Well, the Biden administration, they really sold access." And she was kind of defensive about that, but then kind of admitted he was right. With Hunter Biden selling access to Joe Biden. But they could never have monetized the presidency like Trump has, which we'll get into a moment, which I've said, right? Trump is just better at it. But here's Elon Musk, making this thing up, that Trump is, like, this isn't, there's things they say about Trump that isn't true. There's a lot of stupid shit out there. But this isn't one of them. Like, this isn't the prevalent thing, right? But here he is reposting this in a way that's supporting Trump, right? Like, just the obliviousness to what Trump's doing.
And yet the Democrats keep claiming that he loves Nazis.
Yeah, that almost never happens. And nobody really takes it seriously. But you know what did happen? Somebody who is a Trumper, an inside guy, said that Trump was in the Jeffrey Epstein files. And said he'll, you do something drastic if the Epstein files was really the true Epstein files were released. I forget what it was. You double down on it, then release those posts. So either you're a lying piece of shit who gets vindictive like Trump and makes up shit. Like saying Trump loves Nazis is a limited burn, a limited, whatever. Saying that he was in the Epstein files when he was in the Epstein files and he was with Jeffrey Epstein. And claiming that Trump is covering that up because Trump was supporting a pedophile and probably engaged in these behaviors himself. That's a pretty fucking severe charge from a guy like you, and much more damaging than a bunch of liberal media. I watch liberal media all the time, and I kind of have a faint recollection of them inferring Trump is a Nazi. Like, it's just, I don't even know if they use the word Nazi. They said about you when you did the Heil Hitler thing, you fuck. But you just came out and said the guy was Jeffrey Epstein files, and then you reversed that. So either he's in the files and you don't give a shit he's a pedo, and you knew all along, he didn't say anything until he fucking did, whatever he did that you didn't like, right? And so, this is what I'm talking about, right? It's conditional. Like all of a sudden Trump's great again. He's reposted some of Trump's stuff. A bunch of his stuff is his business. The people love this guy. Truthers do. Or they did before Trump, or Trumpers loved him. He's pushing for Neuralink, which is the ultimate in chipping people and enhanced chips, which is something that the truth community was firmly against. And especially the right-wing people were against that kind of shit, right? And, if chipping a person allows a blind person to see, or a crippled person to be able to use their legs or whatever, that would be wonderful. That's real advancement, but, this is not what I think it's going to be used for with him. And I'm going through his page looking for this thing. I missed it, so I scrolled down. I got a few more things. He reposts a shit ton of stuff with J.D. Vance posts. J.D. Vance posts a lot more on Twitter, where Trump uses his own social, his true social bullshit, right? But this is what I'm talking about. He's re-showing this clip about disinformation being talked about Trump. So either you lied about it being in Jeffrey Epstein files, or now before you were cool with it, and you were cool with it now. But for a brief moment when you were pissed at Trump, you were upset about it. That means you're a lying piece of shit, right?
Even though he specifically said he condemns them in the strongest possible terms, they still perpetuate the fine people hoax. Yes. It's pretty insane. So for any given thing that somebody says, well, Trump is this or that, just send them the actual speech. That's the antidote.
And if he denied he's in the Epstein files, anybody could say they're not a Nazi, but lie about it, right?
Send them what he actually said.
Thank you. And then the second part,
X platform actually has that. So,
it does. It does.
So, that's the best way.
That's the best way. Go to my platform. It's the best way. It is the best way. Go do it. That's the best way. So I got there was a Fetterman post that he reposted, but I'll get into in a moment, totally Fetterman about the shit going on in L.A. And I want to get to Tulsi Gabbard saying there's some deep state stuff pushing for World War III. And then MSNBC's Morning Joe covering that. So these are all things that are coming. And I want to get to the Pete Hegseth being asked about Trump's plane is hilarious. That thing, right? But here, totally worth it. Elon Musk lost 25% of his fortune during his quest to gut the government. Tesla paid the price for its CEO's unprecedented side gig, slashing federal bureaucracy under Trump. It wasn't totally worth it. It was like fucking not worth it at all because you didn't do shit. Like it was a failure and you lost your fucking money. And then there was this one. Tesla has by the far most advanced real-world AI. No one else is even close. Join us at Tesla. Elon Musk warned against the AI. He said, it's going to be... he gave a very stark warning, but now he's saying that he has more advanced AI than anybody. But this one, Elon Musk reposting the real Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass should apologize to the people of Los Angeles for absolutely horrible job that they have done. And this now includes the ongoing LA riots. These are not protesters. They are troublemakers and insurrectionists. Remember, no masks. What this is, he wants to have the Insurrection Act, which was something to go against the January 6th thing. And he wants to put these acts, these emergency power acts, and all these crisis acts in so he can get power grab. Trump does. And Elon Musk was just saying this guy should be impeached. And now he's reposting this bullshit, right? Which is obviously the riots are fake. The whole thing's fake. It's a left-right, stage thing. Things that they're both benefiting from. Trump is looking to impose martial law. The left's looking to promote Gavin Newsom and all these things. It's just, the whole thing looks fake as fuck. Let's go to Tulsi Gabbard here first. No, let's go to Pete Hegseth. And I'm showing you these things. I would show you them anyway, but they go along with this theme of what I talked about. When you open up to God as like God as a partner, and it's not really a partnership because God's right. And you're fumbling around trying to make decisions, right? Like God's right about everything, because God can't be wrong. Like God doesn't think. God doesn't choose. God has no choices. God has one choice is the right choice, right? Like the divine choice. There's no egotist. God doesn't have an ego, doesn't have a mind like we have, doesn't have the ability for, we have infinite amount of choices. With every situation we can do any number of different things, right? You can jump up and down, quack like a duck. You can, or meow like a cat, or you can get on all fours and bark like a dog. You can go fly a kite, right? You can say, you can just be like, blah, 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 just gobbledygook. Somebody asks you a question, you could do any number of random sounds. You could give them a legitimate answer, or you could just do any ridiculous thing, right? It's infinite amount of possible choices that you can make. And so God helps you find the right choice. There's one right choice in every situation, and having the attitude that you want to do God's work. It's not just the choice, but it's your attitude of why you're doing the choice. Because sometimes it's almost like God will trick your ego, and not really, like you'll trick yourself to do the right thing. But you'll have to have other motivation because doing the right thing doesn't appeal to your ego. So your ego has to be almost like tricked to do the right thing. It's almost like your soul is allowing your ego to mislead itself to do the right thing. And because doing the right thing in itself isn't enough for your ego to do just on its own, right? And so, when you work with God and you are following God's lead and you're looking for God's feedback, your work becomes simple. And so I had this, this download that came to me last night. And then all these clips were either already there or were stuff that was going to develop. In this video, I'm going to put this whole thing And all this stuff is important, at least the beginning part here, in a separate video and in my Journey series, 199th edition to the Journey series, because it's all kind of it's real life. There's the talk I gave in the beginning, the 30-minute voiceover, and then there's the real life stuff here. So this is hilarious.
Senator Murphy, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I wanted to build on some of the questions.
It's funny how they thank the person and they shit all over them. It's like, thank you for being here so I can shit all over you.
Senator Schatz was asking just to try to build a fact predicate for some of the tough spending decisions we're going to have to make here. Just to confirm, I heard you say with respect to the gift of the plane from Qatar that we do not yet have a signed MOU with the government of Qatar. Is that right?
Correct. We're in the process of working through that.
So Trump was given a $400 million plane. And, I knew it was corrupt. And, I mean, we don't need all this information. But this guy's going to provide really key information that makes it even more fucked up. Like even more obvious that it's a complete scam, right?
And did you also say we don't have a signed contract with the company that is going to do the work? Or did you say that we have a contract, you're just not willing to disclose the terms?
The terms should not be disclosed of anything related to an aircraft of this type.
So in 2018, when the contract was signed with Boeing to do the upgrades or the new contracts for Air Force One, the terms of that contract were disclosed. They were made public. In fact, it was the Trump administration that issued a press release giving the total as $3.9 billion. Are you saying this time around, even after you signed?
So they are upgrading Air Force One, and it's going to cost $3.9 billion. Wait, let me see. Let's that part again. Make sure I got that right.
That contract were disclosed.
Yeah, let's see right here.
Or the new contracts for Air Force One, the terms of that contract were disclosed. They were made public. In fact, it was the Trump administration that issued a press release giving the total as $3.9 billion. Are you saying this time around?
Holy shit. $3.9 billion for his new Boeing Air Force One, and they won't tell you how much it's going to cost to retrofit this other plane, right? Some of that Boeing stuff is the planes themselves. But he's got a $400 million plane, and then they're going to upgrade it and put all this Air Force One bullshit in there. All this stuff for him to, remember George W. Bush, when 9/11 happened, got up in Air Force One and just circled the sky for like 2 days. Remember that shit?
Around even after you sign the contract, you're not going to make public any of the terms of the contract?
I wasn't involved in that previous administration decision, but we're happy to take a look.
The Air Force testified before the House that that contract would likely deliver the new Air Force Ones by the 2028 timeframe. It doesn't stand to reason that you will be able to retrofit the plane from Qatar much sooner than 2028. So I'm trying to understand what the gap is that we're trying to fill. If this contract ends up being $500 million and the gap only ends up being 6 months, that doesn't sound like a wise investment for this committee to make.
This is the part I heard. I didn't hear that first part. So this is how fucked this is. So Trump has been given this plane. He's going to get the plane. Then Air Force has to change it around and put all the shit that the president needs in Air Force One. So president has a plane now. Trump has a plane now. Then when he pulled up to all the other planes, he was like, oh my God, my plane sucks so much worse than these other guys' plane. Like, this is how fucking selfish prick Trump is. So Qatar gives him a fucking plane that's $400 million, that's 10 years old. It's kind of a, used for them. And he has this plane that he's saying $500 million to retrofit it. this guy just said, for them to make it into Air Force One, they have to redo this whole plane. And so, holy shit, right? Like this is supposed to be under Doge, and it might take years for them to do this. Like they got to get the plane and retrofit it. And so let's say it takes, like he said, all the way to 2028, which will be when the re-election's coming. And so Trump will have that plane as president for 6 months. Then it's going to go to his library, and Trump's going to have that plane for the rest of his life. So he's got a $400 million plane from Qatar, and then it's going to be retrofitted with whatever Air Force One stuff that he's going to have on there. And, of course, he'll take off some of the stuff because he won't, like the black box thing or whatever it is, right? But then he's going to be given this plane, for his own personal Trump plane. It'll be a Trump plane, and they're doing it through his stupid fucking library bullshit thing. Why does it not library need a fucking plane, right? So he's scamming the system, and it's going to be a $900 million, billion-dollar plane he's going to be given. That's all, some of it's a gift and a buyout from a country, like a bribe, and some of it's fucking government taxpayer money. And then they'll be making 2 new Air Force Ones at a $3 billion fucking clip. And then you're going to roll out Doge and that shit? Like it just shows you, Pete Hegseth, he's just going along with this. They're all going along with this thing. Elon Musk and the rest of them. Like, why wouldn't Elon Musk call out his bullshit plane thing here?
Senator, I would defer to the expertise of the Air Force as far as timing of modifications and when that would happen. But there's also been delay after delay after delay on the Boeing side. So I don't know that's a firm fixed date yet, unfortunately, can be counted on.
So
yeah, you know what? Fucking, you're lucky to have you have a private fucking jet. Like, like you just want, Jesus Christ. He's got Air Force One. It's not good enough for him to have a private jet paid for. Those things cost so much money to for upkeep and things, like private jets and all that shit, airplanes. They have to go through all kinds of maintenance protocols. You can't have a thing. It's like when you are driving your car and there's something wrong with it, but you can, it's not going to break down like immediately, and you delay getting something new. You can't do that with a fucking plane, especially Air Force One. And so, like, there's all these, there's the staffing for that thing and the fuel and all the stuff. It costs the taxpayers like billions of dollars, apparently. I thought it was millions of dollars. So he can fly around, and he doesn't like his jets, so he's going to have Boeing make him a couple for $3 billion, and he's not even going to be president at that time. And then the other thing he's got now, fucking Jesus Christ, it's going to be his private one. This is the ultimate and the selfish prick, fucking arrogant, grifting shit that he's getting, and no one gives a shit. And that's the thing. I was watching this Stephanie Rule thing last night, and they were talking about how both Biden, they downplayed the Biden part, and Trump have sold the presidency. And they're saying people don't give a shit. And that's the truth. No one gives a shit. Even with this Elon Musk thing, right there, countries going bankrupt, these motherfuckers are taking a big shit on the American taxpayers, and with this $1 billion shit on the fucking $3 billion, $4 billion shit on the American taxpayer.
Obviously, the underlying question here is what is going to happen to the plane at the end of Trump's presidency. The president said on May 12th that this plane would be transferred to his presidential library at the end of his term. Is that your understanding of what is going to happen to this plane?
The president said that. That's my understanding. Although
holy shit! Like this, nobody cares. How is this fucking going down? Like, this is how I talked about when Joe Biden and Trump were running in 2020. Whoever won was going to be in charge of looting what was left of American wealth. But then, of course, I didn't know there was going to be this as well. The looting here of American fucking treasure is unbelievable.
We would look at what comes out in the MOU.
But why would we ask the American taxpayer to spend upwards of $1 billion on a plane that would then only be used for a handful of months and then transferred directly to the president? That doesn't sound like a wise use of taxpayer dollars.
No, what do you mean wise? It's fucking criminal. Like, that he's fucking grifting. Like, that's stealing from fucking taxpayers. He just stole $1 billion for his fucking plane, this fat fucking Job of the Hutt motherfucker, right? It's stealing. Like, it's not fucking unwise. It's stealing. It's fucking, I mean, it's impulsive and just, it's gross. It's fucking gross.
A lot of the capabilities, as you know, Senator, of that particular platform are and should remain classified. So there are reasons why you might modify, even for a short period of time, an aircraft to ensure the safety and security of
Don't fucking say that. You can do everything on Air Force One now. You know, what difference does it make? You know, what the fuck? He's got to put a gold toilet in that thing. He had an airplane with a gold toilet in it, right?
Yeah, President of the United States.
But when do you believe that those upgrades would be made? How long would the president have it before it got transferred to his personal possession?
That would be a determination of the Air Force that would take hold of it and make those modifications within whatever time window they believe gets it to the place where it need to be.
Yeah, I think this is extraordinary, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about a pretty massive investment of appropriations dollars into a plane that the Secretary is saying is currently planned to be transferred personally to the president. There's a lot of other pending needs that we need to fund. This would seem to be low on the list. Mr. Secretary, one final question. Obviously, you know that there is a concern in the public about a double standard that is applied to protest, sometimes protest that turns violent. The president, when he came into office, issued pardons to the individuals that attacked the United States Capitol, including those individuals who beat savagely police officers. You have deployed the National Guard and readied Marines in a way that many people think is unnecessary given the state and the local resources. So maybe let me ask the question this way so that you can assuage people's concerns that there is a double standard. The National Guard was deployed here on January 6th, and that was a decision made by the Department of Defense. Do you support that decision? Do you believe that that was the right decision to deploy the National Guard to defend the Capitol on January 6th?
All I know is it's the right decision to be deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles to defend ICE agents who deserve to be defended in the execution of their jobs.
But I think it's important to know whether you think it was also important to have the National Guard defending the United States Capitol when there were violent protests.
These fucking traps that they set. I didn't see this part.
Protesters here on the president's behalf to make sure that folks know that you care about protest, whether it's against the president or on behalf of the president.
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard when that happened and was initially ordered to go guard the inauguration of Joe Biden. But because of the politicization of the Biden administration, my orders were revoked. And ultimately, because of the politics.
It's always fucking, you know, this is how they get out of their traps. This guy set a trap for him because he's going to say, well, if it was okay to put the National Guard in, why is Trump pardoning those criminals? And you know, pardon one group. It's like he's setting them up, right? And he knows he's setting them up. So he invokes the Biden thing here.
Being played inside the Defense Department by the previous administration.
But do you support the decision made on January 6th to send the National Guard here to defend
I support
the
the decision that President Trump made and requesting the National Guard that was denied.
So you do not.
President Trump
you do not support the decision.
Support
you do not
for the
support
National
the
Guard
decision
in
to
advance.
Yeah, so it always ends up in a shit show like this. So there's that. Let's go to Tulsi Gabbard here.
I recently visited Hiroshima in Japan and stood at the epicenter of a city that remains scarred by the unimaginable horror caused by...
What's going on here? Like, how does that fucking happen? Why is there one fucking gray streak here? Like, that doesn't seem like... Is that possible? Like, what's the deal?
By a single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945, 80 years ago.
Boom.
It's hard for me to find the words to express what I saw, the stories that I heard, the haunting sadness that still remains. This is an experience that will stay with me forever.
It is. Oh, it's just a horrible experience. And you know, you brought cameras and you're talking about it and posting a video on YouTube, and with the self-promoting fucking, you know.
This attack obliterated the city, killed over 300,000 people, many dying instantly while others died from severe burns, injuries, radiation sickness, and cancer that set in the following months and years. Nagasaki suffered the same fate. Homes, schools, families, all gone in a flash. The survivors, the hibakusha, they carried the pain of extreme burns, radiation sickness, and loss for decades. Survivors of this attack were asked to put in paintings and drawings their own memories and how they felt and what they saw, and those paintings and the suffering that they conveyed, the pain and the sense of loss were almost more powerful.
She's really fucking leaning into this fucking thing.
Than the photos themselves. Yet this one bomb...
You know, this is, I mean, it's horrific what happened there. You know, there's people from the blast, like if people were standing in front of a wall, the blast created a shadow that burned into the wall, like shit like that. Like people were melted and shit, right? And these things are horrific, demonic fucking weapons. I mean, this is, you know, in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, they're called, you know, demonic energy, that this, you know, this stuff is demonic. And they mismanaged not just the bombs, but the nuclear power plants. And that one day the atom will wreck this world, like the atomic power. That all these, you know, this is going to happen, right? Which she's going to lean into here. But she's doing it in the worst possible way here.
That caused so much destruction on Hiroshima was tiny compared to today's nuclear bombs. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of just 15 kilotons of TNT.
Just.
Whereas today's nuclear warheads range in size from 100 kilotons to over 1 megaton. A single nuclear weapon today could kill millions in just minutes. Just one of these nuclear bombs would vaporize everything at its core. People, buildings, life itself. The shockwave would crush structures miles away, killing and maiming countless people. And then comes the fallout. Radioactive poison spreading through the air, water, and soil, condemning survivors to agonizing deaths or lifelong suffering. A nuclear winter could follow, with smoke and ash completely blocking the sun, plunging the world into darkness and cold, killing crops and starving billions.
You know, I'm glad she's doing this part, because this is, you know, actually something that that it talks about in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages. I'll read, you know, one of those messages after this thing.
Acid rain would scar the earth, wiping out entire ecosystems. This isn't some made-up science fiction story. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now. Because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers.
Okay, so this is the bogus part. This is like saying deep state is creating this. You know, Trump's a piece of shit, and you lied about, she got up and lied about the Pete Hegseth stuff, covered for his fucking incompetence, and then all the other things that went with it, right? Like, they're fucking lying about all that shit. And, like, going back, let's listen to that again here. But her saying this, why is she telling you on YouTube? Like, you can do something about this, right? Like, you know, if Trump's president, then what are you talking about here? Like, people that are telling him that he needs to go to, like, who are these people, and how are the people you're talking to going to affect these people who are trying to bring about World War III and nuclear war?
Nuclear annihilation than ever before. Political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to.
Yeah, you know, they still want to go outside, right? Like, you can have a nuclear shelter. You could have, like, fucking pimped out nuclear, multi-fucking $100 million nuclear shelter that has everything in it, plants, you know, food, media, you ain't going outside ever again. Like, you're stuck in a fucking building for the rest of your life, and everyone there with you, even if you bring, people, young people are coming in, marrying and having kids, and over generations, you get a bunch of inbred fucks that are, living in some shelter. It's no fucking life, not being able to go outside. And so, this is being pushed on people. Trump is, we talked about, totally be willing to use nuclear weapons in his first term. He's back to have a big military parade. And he's doing things that, with the terrorists and all these other things, that could easily lead to any of these issues. And she's running the NSA, and she has access to information here, and must know that Trump is a complete fucking moron. And he's not, the stuff he's doing back in Israel, the stuff that's happening with all these people. There's something like 2 billion Muslims, and Iran and some of these other Muslim countries have all these various, epic militaries, and, big military in Iran, and these other countries have lots of money. And then there's their alliance with Russia, which is a nuclear power. And then there's China. And Israel has nuclear weapons. So, all these things are part of that, right? And Trump is definitely driving us towards this, as well as Biden was. Like, Biden in the Ukrainian war and these other things. And she's, look at her fucking face. Like, this is, like, she did a good job on at least showing you what these things could lead to. But we're not, what am I going to fucking do about this other than pray? And the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, which I'll read afterwards, are a part of this thing, right? That this is going to happen. Like, it's already happened. It's already in some future, in a cyclical time. The nuclear catastrophe has already happened. We're not going to prevent it because it's God's will. And, whatever blame you want to have on fucking elites and other people, right here.
Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to.
Manipulative music in the background.
So it's up to us, the people, to speak up and demand an end to this madness.
Okay, let's do it. Who do I go tell? Who do I go up and say, this is madness? Like, if people are actually planning a nuclear fucking war, then they're far beyond listening to fucking me and you and the rest. Let's speak up about this. Let's speak up. Let's speak up and say, hey, stop the madness. Stop the madness already with this nuclear fucking war you guys are doing. You're going to be melted, motherfuckers.
We must reject this path to nuclear war and work toward a world where no one has to live in fear of a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, you know what? The Jewish people have copyrighted the word Holocaust. You're not supposed to use it. I don't know if you got the memo. Like, holy fuck, right? Part of that was good, but most of the ending was horrible and just fucking ridiculous. And Trump's an ass clown, and he's leading, America on this pathway to nuclear destruction. So let me read the Whispers of the Brighter World messages here, which I'm glad this led to this. Like, I'm going to include this whole video in the Journey series, this whole part of it, and I have a few more things to add that I'm not sure I'll include those parts. But, this is, it's all kind of led to this, right? This is not listening to God. Once they created nuclear weapons, and they can say, oh, we had to do it before the Germans did, sure. You can always make up some bullshit. But, it's not true. It's not true. Like, it's not, you didn't have to make nuclear weapons, and we're clearly not prepared to use them. We're not mature enough to have them. And eventually they're going to be used. You build something that's going to be used. There's no weapon that's ever been built that people are like, we got it, but we're not going to use it. If you built it, you're going to use it, right? And, all the information, all the divine warnings, all the things that are out there didn't stop this. Look at her concern. Look at her she's so fucking concerned. Look how concerned. Look at my compassionate eyes here. I just want to stop nuclear war. I just want to do it. I just want to stop this nuclear war. It's just fucking stupid, right? Just, It's a lie. It's all a fucking lie. People are fucked up, and we have nuclear weapons and AI, fucking whatever we're building. We can't wait to destroy ourselves. We can't fucking wait to destroy ourselves. That's, we're self-destructive. Human beings are self-destructive. We see it in people's lives, people making choices. Not every single person, but every single person flirts with self-destruction. And I'm not talking about suicide. I'm talking about doing things to sabotage one's soul's path, doing things to sabotage one's spiritual evolution and their lives, right? Destroying their lives, cheating on their spouses, cheating, whatever it is, lying and cheating in their job and work, and, doing all these things that, alcohol, drugs, and, all these things are self-sabotaging. Let me show you this. I have a picture here of the betting line on Indiana and Oklahoma City, and that's part of this, and then I'll read the Whispers of the Brighter World. Okay, so I took a picture of this. I was watching the Get Up for a brief period of time this morning, this show. I was eating breakfast. And here's the line. So the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is perceived to be the better team, the Pacers are up 2-1, but still the Thunder has showed like they have great defense in these things, right? They're coming in, they were 700 plus 700 or minus 700, right? So you're giving up, again, I don't bet. And I'm, when I did bet for a brief period of time and I knew it was bullshit, you bet times, there'd be a point spread. And so these are, the odds that you get, right? So you're minus, you're going to, what you'll recruit from your bet will be you're minus 550 entering game 3, and now current it dropped down to 240. But the difference, if you bet Indiana, you were plus 400, right? And that's, I don't know, the point spread or whatever. I don't know how that all works, right? But why wouldn't it be minus 550? Because the difference between 400 and 550, which is 150, and then 195 and 240, which is 45, right? 55, I'm sorry, is 45. That's the amount that there has to be some, middle ground where the house makes money, right? The odd differential here. Do you see that? Like if they're minus 550, they should be plus 550. But the house, this is, they have it working both ways. Do you understand that there's, like if it was an even bet, they would say, all right, if these guys are was minus 550 to win, and these guys have to be plus 550. But this is how gambling's rigged. It's always rigged in a way where they have more, they have this middle ground where they're winning, right? The middle ground between 550 and 400 and 240 and 195 is, substantial. So back when I bet, you would bet times, and the times was $5. And so you would bet 20 times, which would be $100 or whatever, 1,000 times. And you would lose $6. So if you won, you won 5, but if you lost, you won 6. I mean, if you lost, you had to pay out 6, right? So, the bookie just wanted half the people to bet on one team and half the people to bet on the other, and they would get that dollar. So if they got, 10,000 times in bets, they would make 10 grand just on that $1 because it's rigged against you. The gambling's always rigged against you, right? And this, it's you're betting to lose. The house has an unfair advantage. The odds are in the house favor. Any game that you play, except for counting cards, there's games of skill like poker, but that's usually played between, people. Not that it doesn't. The house doesn't. The house gets whatever percentage of the, the pot or whatever as a fee of like you have these gambling, these poker houses. There's a good movie about that. Some woman who, had these celebrity poker players. It's kind of worth watching. I forget the name of it. Doesn't matter. Don't tell me. Don't care to know. You can look it up if you want. But the the house always wins. You know, there's gambling money. I lived in Las Vegas area, and they have a shit ton of money, the parks and everything. They're spilling over with money because people are just giving them free money. Tourist dollars and gambling dollars. In fact, you know, they'll comp your room. They'll pay for these luxury rooms and your meals and comp your drinks, and, you know, because you're going to throw away fucking tens of thousands of millions of dollars in some cases, right? Big time gamblers. And people who gamble a lot, you know, they'll win and they'll always think big of their winnings. But if they add it all up, they realize they've lost a lot more than they've won because it's rigged. And so people are self-destructive. This is what I'm talking about. This is another way of being self-destructive. You work real hard to accumulate money, and you could use that money and give it to people who need it. Like, if you're going to just throw it fucking away, find a good cause, find a charity, find somebody who needs money. I mean, there's all these people who are suffering. That there's people out there that, you know, if they just had a little bit more money, it would help them go over the top. Like, they're just struggling. They're good people, hardworking people, families. You know, they just need a little boost. They just need a little help. And instead of giving it to these fucking criminal gambling magnates, you could give it to these people. Or you could buy some piece of land and just let it be there for animals or something, right? Just whatever it is, that you could find a way to make the world a better place. But you just want to go there and fucking have the thrill of gambling. And it's self-destructive. You're going to feel like shit when you lose, right? That's the thing about gambling. You feel like shit. Because it's like a stupid thing to do. You're just throwing your fucking money away. Might as well just light it on fire, right? But you're giving it to scumbag fucking gambling people. That, you know, if you learn how to count cards, they'll beat the shit out of you and make sure you have to wear disguises. Because, you know, every place, every casino will have a picture of your face. If they catch you counting cards, they'll beat the shit out of you, even though it's not illegal to count cards. You've developed a strategy. It's just the odds are no longer in the house's favor. And so, you know, this is what I'm talking about, being self-destructive. Okay, so before I read the Whispers messages, I just wanted to clarify this. I had ChatGPT explain this type of betting because I don't understand it. So I wrote, Oklahoma City are plus 240, and I should have said minus 240. The Pacers are minus 95. And so 195. The team with the minus sign is a favorite. In this case, the Indiana Pacers are the favorite at 195, but they're really the underdog. The number of associated with the minus tells you how much you need to bet to win 100. So you have to bet $240 to win $100 if you're OKC. So to win $100, you're betting $240. So you're risking losing $140 extra dollars. Like, so that's, you know, and then whatever, I don't know if that's a point spread based betting. And the number associated with the minus sign tells you how much you need to bet to win 100. So if you bet the Pacers at 195, you need to bet 195 plus profit. And so let me ask one more question here. Okay, so I asked him a follow-up question. So that's a straight bet. There's no point spread. So you bet for the Pacers to win, you bet $100 to win a possible 195, right? And so for the Oklahoma City Thunder, you'd bet $240 to win 100. And so the house would get $140. You know, the differential is the house is getting $140 extra, and you're only getting 95 extra if you win, right? So there's a differential of $45, like I said earlier. The house has can make $45 on every bet. If one person bets $100 for Oklahoma City Thunder, and another person bets $100 on the Pacers, the house would still get $45 from those two people. If you bet on both sides, the house would get, would make that much money. Let's say you bet $100 on each side, you just be giving them $45, right? And so that's how it's rigged. It's fucked you, like, you know, either way. There's no point spread there. So you're thinking, all right, the Oklahoma City's going to win because they're the better team. So I'm going to make $100, but I'm risking a lot in case that doesn't pan out, right? And the odds has shrunk. The differential has shrunk because the Pacers just are up 2-1. And the odds are shrinking now a little bit. And so they're getting closer together. But either way, the house still wins, right? So you're betting to lose. You might win and someone else might lose, but you'll lose the next time and they'll win the next time. And so, but the thing is that people who gamble, oftentimes they're just always picking the wrong side. And there's some people who gamble and win a little bit more than they lose. That's a rarity. But the majority of people are losers. So they bet the wrong side time and time again, right? And so I worked with this Italian restaurant. There was a very Italian-looking waitress who was, she dated a bookie. And they lived together for like 10 years. And he went away during one of the Super Bowls with the Washington Redskins, now the Washington Commanders. And the Redskins crushed the other team. And she was taking bets, and everyone was betting Washington. Like, everybody knew Washington was so much better. And she kept on moving the line. So the more you move the line, and that shows you where the bets are. So, like, let's say Washington was giving 11 points, that they had to win by 11 or more points. She was moving the line, and she still wasn't getting bets on the other side. I think they played Denver, or maybe it was Buffalo, one of those teams. And she couldn't move the line enough, and they ended up winning by like 48 points. It wasn't even close. And she lost 20 grand. Like, they lost, the house lost. There was a little bookie thing. And she said that broke her and her boyfriend up, because he went away during the Super Bowl, left her to deal with the bookie, which is a bullshit thing to do anyway. But either way, they weren't going to make it a 20-point game. Like, that's, no matter how much they moved the line, people were not betting against the Redskins. They had a dominant team. They were clearly going to crush the other team. And once in a while you get something like that, where they lose a lot of money. But, in the end, they still made, I'm sure if they looked over the years as a bookie, he did this as a job, right? And so, this was illegal betting back when it was illegal. Now, of course, it's legal everywhere. So anyways, this is, self-destructive behavior I was talking about. Another self-destructive behavior, this all stems from not asking God what you should do or not do. Asking God for input and letting God guide you in making the right decision. And so that all stems from that self-destructive behavior. Once you go away from God, you are now in a self-destructive mode because you're going in the wrong direction. You're doing bad things. Okay, so just a few whispers of the brighter world messages here. I want to cover, the last thing would be the Morning Joe. This is going to be a long video already, so I'll put this all together, then I'll turn this in a separate video on the Gratefullness Meditation channel and the Journey series. And so it's kind of an epic video for me, at least. So there is this French woman. She's now dead, died in 2018. She delivered more of these channeled messages, mostly from the second master of the Sahaj Marg system, but multiple other saints and higher developed souls. 20,000 messages or more, the most that have ever been delivered, these types of messages. And there's a short section on prophecies, and if you want to listen to all the prophecies, I have a video somewhere on this YouTube channel, I believe, called Whispers Prophecies, and I think it's public here, not on the member. And then I'm going to make a follow-up, because there's a section called Prophecies in the first book, and I'm going to read 2 messages from that today. And then there's all these other messages, hundreds of them that have some sort of prophecies about. They're not all like in terms of doomsday negative things, but they also talk about what's going to come next after that, which is a spiritual renaissance. So the idea is, this current system has to come down, and then something else has to take its place. And so I want to read 2 of these messages today, just in terms of the nuclear war stuff. So, this woman was freaked out. She was a shut-in, someone who was had a, disability, like a back issue from a botched operation. And she couldn't really leave the house, and, she wasn't a truther, didn't know many of these things. And she was always in doubt of the legitimacy of the messages. She had, doubt in herself. There's a whole thing. And so these things freaked her out, but, she was told just to write them down. They don't have anything to do with you, and don't worry about it. And, and she could choose not to write them down, but this information wasn't for her, so why worry? And so let me read the first one here. This is from Friday, December 29, 2008 a.m. Nuclear power will ruin the world. This badly controlled power is demonic. One day, man will be overwhelmed by its power. Upheavals that will change the world will have their origin in it. It has a much wider implications than you could imagine, and which could contribute to stabilizing the balance of this planet. In this matter also, man plays with fire, without actually being aware of the detrimental consequences for humanity. A natural energy will replace all that is currently used and which are harmful to man. Human knowledge does not allow for its use for the time being. These secrets will be revealed to men of goodwill who will be looking for inspired scientific research. That energy will be non-polluting and not very expensive. Those with money power will not be content with it. Only the absolute necessity for survival of the world will prevail. This time is not going to happen tomorrow. The earth will go through great changes before getting into that. These prophecies do not concern you, he's saying that to the woman. You are undergoing the damaging effects of these insidious pollutions, which will lead to the world to collapsing. But you can neither stop time nor modify the system in place. Then protect yourself as well as possible from the harmful effects, and pray for your brothers of the future, Babaji. So I read that fairly recently, and I've read this recently as well. Here's the Wednesday, February 28th, 2001, 9 a.m. In a quarter of a century, so in February of 2026 or sometime around then, it's not an exact date. In a quarter of a century, the earth will experience a major turbulence that will be the beginning of a cycle which earthmen will find very difficult to go through. Fire will literally beat down on certain parts of the world, whereas torrents of rain will pour over others. Cataclysms will follow one another for many long years, keeping men frightened. Many will turn toward a supreme God, beseeching his forgiveness for more and more aberrant behaviors, as well for the maltreatment imposed on their nourishing mother, the earth. The failure to respect the elements will lead to the effects generating terror among the population of the end of this century. So that's the end of this century in 75 years. In future ages, the present layout of the continents will be shattered. Maps will need revising, yet the creatures inhabiting this planet will have more than enough to do in order to survive rather than dealing with those details. Atom, A-T-O-M, will turn against mankind who will not have been able to harness it, and its lightning power will be devastating. The time for punishment for such a conceit will take place as hard as it can, and man, paying for his ancestors' glaring mistakes, will suffer without having any control over his situation. The transformation of this planet must go through all these cataclysms in order to be effectively completed. Babaji. So it kind of goes with what I was saying at the beginning of the video, in which, mistakes were made. Let me just check one thing here. So there's many whispers of White Bright World messages where he talks about ignoring warnings. And I found this one, which was really, I don't remember this message, but it's kind of profound. Wednesday, August 24th, 2005, 10 a.m. My child, our bonds are timeless. They carry us through ages where our destinies are fulfilled. This is illustrated by the history of these messages, which will mark a long period of time in helping humanity in its tribulations. A century of wandering will be necessary to put it back into a salutary and decisive context for its evolution. As you can see, your perseverance in serving us and your efforts are not useless. Today's man, assailed from all sides and caught up in the web of information, does not devote the necessary time to what could serve as a springboard towards another level of consciousness. The elements will see to cleansing the situation by cutting it off, if necessary, from a consumer society that is aberrant and destructive beyond human imagination. Caught up in the whirl of life and comfort, they neglect essential values and enslave their bodies to an alleged easiness that hinders a natural balance. This has repercussions on all levels of being. In the current state of affairs, humans cannot backtrack. Only necessity will manage to do this. When and how, we cannot currently say. Many warning signs appear everywhere on Earth. Humans, being attentive to this phenomena, question themselves. They consider them as the hand of destiny in the face of a sad situation in this world. Many brothers and sisters attached from frivolity and excess associated with this world in order to always go further in a conquest of the world of spirit. The spirit will not disappoint them. Many, all will be enlightened and strengthened in this process. So that was one of many messages in which he talks about these warnings being ignored. It's just said over and over again, which is just obvious, right? You see it, like I just said in the beginning of this video. And so, there's this idea that we have a choice, but then there's like it already happened, and just, like things are going to happen no matter what. And so that's the other part, like the compulsion to make things happen that have to happen. And so to go in a certain direction to create a certain level of disconnect and go in a wayward direction that leads to a collapse and a moment where you hit rock bottom. Collectively, we all hit rock bottom, and then we want to be better. We strive to be better. And you see that, that what happens to people when they've been addicted to something for, many, many years, and they hit rock bottom and they really want to change. And that's, it takes a lot to get people to change. It takes a level of desperation, these things. And so that's just all part of it. But it's just so easy. The problem with when you listen to God and you do the right thing, you don't see what happens when you make the other choices. The other choices that lead to disasters, it leads to, horrific, consequences. And so you don't really understand how lucky you have it. So that means you don't really get, the full, the magnitude, unless you see other people's lives and the choices they make, and you can kind of empathize with that and understand and feel what it would be like if you were in that situation. But, it's only when you make the mistakes and you realize, oh my God, I wish I had done this other thing. Like, you don't appreciate it. Doing the right thing, you don't understand it ends up being, it's so subtle. And like I said, it becomes simple and easy that you don't realize all the disasters and difficulties you could have created for yourself had you chose something else. Well, anyways, let me go to the piece with Morning Joe.
It's just before the top of the hour. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard posted a bleak video on social media warning of a nuclear holocaust. The 3-minute video includes imagery of atomic blasts and simulations of American cities and landmarks like the Golden Gate Bridge being destroyed. Gabbard blames the political elite for pushing the world's superpowers into a global war.
This isn't some made-up science fiction story. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now. Because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to.
Jonathan Lemire.
Look at this fucking ghoul here. I mean, is he even is this some AI generated ghoul? Like, AI could do a better job, right?
What's the backstory here?
So she went to Hiroshima recently, and that's what she says.
Well, you guys going to play the whole 3-minute clip. The part that's worth seeing, I mean, everybody should see the middle part. Like, that's excellent. Like, I didn't know that existed. The part where she talks about, what happened in Hiroshima, which is, everyone should be aware of it. And then the middle part the part after that where she talked about the atomic yield, the nuclear yield now, of what it could do in terms of these weapons they now have. Like, as bad as that was. So, I mean, if this is going to happen, like I said in these Whispers of Brighter World messages, like, it's a definite, like, not a, the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, they came out in 2005. She started to give these messages in 1994 or 5, and she'd give one a week. And she was like thinking she was going crazy. And some woman showed up, another practitioner in the system said, Babaji told me to come over here and tell you that these messages are real. Like, some other practitioner who just, was also good, was like a medium. And she, the third master of the system, who, the other masters had the ability for intercommuning, and he was bummed that it wasn't happening for him, and he doubted it at first. It went through a whole thing. And the book came out, and people were, even though Babaji, the second master, intercommuned with Jesus and Krishna and Buddha and Swami Vivekananda and all these higher developed souls, and many people and many souls that are higher developed that don't have aren't famous on a human level. And he was regularly doing that, and he wrote about this in his diary. It's a part of the system. People were kind of a little bit freaked out. Some people quit the mission over it. And almost nobody wanted to talk about the prophecies. Like, I talked to people about the prophecies, and I thought these people who believed, some of them really loved Whispers, these books. They just loved them because there's very loving messages and inspirational messages. That makes up the bulk of the book. Probably about 70% of it's that. Like, it just these, just what the spirituality can do for you, and talking about love and, all these things. And there's lots of people who like those messages. And I like those, but, the prophecies are far more interesting, But I talked to people about it, and not one person I talked to was willing to prepare for it. Most of them said, they're fatalism. So the prophecies didn't do anything for the people in the mission. Of course, it's gotten hijacked by this guy Dodgy, who's taking the thing in the wrong direction, and all the things I've talked about in other videos. So it's the whole thing is kind of interesting, right? But these messages aren't, people can look back at them and say, oh yeah, this is, if everything that is predicted in these messages comes true, there won't be much of a world anyway. And I don't know if people will be aware of it. And it will, validate some prophesical aspect of these messages, which is okay. That's kind of a neat thing. But, none of it is, the only thing that you need to know about it is, you should certainly prepare any way you can if you believe in them, right? If if you're someone who believes in them. But also, be aware of that there is something bigger at stake here. And the end of civilization has a point as a part of a plan to create a movement where human beings embrace spiritual nature because of, wanting to redeem themselves, like beseeching God for forgiveness, right? Being aware, yeah, we fucked this thing up. We should have never did it, right? Like when the nuclear bombs hit, as Tulsi Gabbard described, and you see that, what happens to the people there and the land, like if a whole city disappears in America and these cities in other parts of the world, and there's all these people, and then there's all these, post-apocalyptic nightmare scenarios, everyone should be aware of it. There's nothing wrong with being informed about that. Her bullshit thing about the political elite kind of wrecks the good part of the video, and it doesn't make much sense, right? But, that other part is something people should think about. We have these horrific weapons, and we have a bunch of fucking morons who are in charge of them, right? And so, this is a bad situation.
Why she's posting this. But in most ways, she's accused of parroting Russian talking points here, that it has been from the Kremlin throughout the conflict in Ukraine, that the West, that the U.S., that NATO is trying to push Russia by, punishing it for invading Ukraine, therefore putting the world on the brink of an atomic conflict. That is what...
These are not Russian talking points. They might be saying it, but the reality of the thing is, when Joe Biden wanted, Russia was not going to let the Ukraine join NATO, and they shouldn't. If I was in charge of Russia, and again, I would make a good leader, but you can't let the NATO be right on your border with a country that has a pretty good sized military, because they would put nuclear missiles right on Russia's border. We didn't let them do that with Cuba. We didn't allow Russia to put missiles into Cuba. Remember that whole thing that happened with Kennedy, the Bay of Pigs, or whatever the fuck it was called, right? And so, you can't allow that to happen. So that was, Joe Biden knew it. And so they pushed Russia to invade the Ukraine. It was totally that. It was not Russia's fault, in terms of what happened there, like all the shit that we know about. And so,
that's what she's saying here, that she's afraid that the, quote, elites want this war. And this is a warning to the U.S. and the West to not punish Russia for not agreeing to a Ukrainian ceasefire, because if Russia is punished...
She didn't say that. Like, she didn't say anything to do with Ukraine and Russia. You can infer those things. But, if this does push Russia into a war, first of all, you have to be honest that Joe Biden did a dick move, that everyone knew who knows about these politics, that Russia was going to invade the Ukraine because they couldn't let Ukraine be a part of NATO. And now that whole thing's fucked. And Russia's depleted, and that was part of it. This was the neocons. The neocons, whatever Biden's deal was, because the neocons were George W. Bush guys. These were all Republicans, the neoconservatives. And they were pro-war. They were really pro-Israel, Zionists. And they were pro all those wars in the Middle East. And they were wrong about all that shit. And then they got discredited. Dick Cheney and all those motherfuckers, like all of them. They made bank on the rebuilding. Dick Cheney got, $100 million from Halliburton, whatever it was, his former company, in dividends because they got these big contracts to rebuild Iraq, right? All that shit. They made bank, George H. Walker Bush and them guys. The $9 million they took from the Pentagon the day before 9/11, right? All that stuff. There was all those things. But they were wrong about all that shit. There was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They destroyed that country. The Afghanistan debacle. Afghanistan is much worse off now. The Taliban have been emboldened by American training. They left the weapons and this stuff there, all that stuff. And so those wars were a disaster. And they proved to, the stuff they did with Libya. I mean, each place is a disaster. It's much worse than it was. Neocons got it wrong. Other than creating wars for the military-industrial complex and distract from the economic collapse, those wars were basically a complete failure. And they were out. Like, all those guys were out. John Bolton, he got blown out by Trump like he was he was one of the worst neocons. But the Bidens put all these neocons in, even though they were Republicans, and they all agreed that the Ukraine was something worth looting money laundering through, right? Because that's what happened. And so that war was created by us and, pressuring Russia. And, they thought they could beat Russia by, getting bogged down in a war in Ukraine like Afghanistan. Russia got bogged down in a war in Afghanistan and it broke them financially. And they were able to, do that stuff with East Germany, to bring down that wall bullshit, with Reagan. And they thought they could do it again, and they failed. And Russia has, they have gone through shit like this before, and they are, they're not going to be broken by this. And now they're strengthened. America, a lot of our missiles, a lot of our equipment has been used by the Ukrainians and, all that stuff. And so, if you don't acknowledge the truth, then there's an issue. The other part to this is that she's talking about avoiding nuclear war, and that's a good thing. And that used to be a Democratic thing, right? It's a Republican now.
They might have to lash out, and we may head up towards the apocalypse. Senator John Kennedy, a Republican, said yesterday when shown this video that he thinks that Gabbard should, quote, change her meds, Katty K. So she's getting some pushback from...
Yeah, that's not, the end part is stupid, but the rest is legitimate. We're on the cusp of fucking World War III. I mean, we have an economic fucking war with China right now, and there's all that shit to do with that. We got an unstable president, which you guys already admit to. And then we have, what's ever going on with Russia and the Ukraine, and then we have the Israel thing. And it's everything's very, we're very close to World War III. There's multiple pathways. Let's see what Katty K has to say.
Republicans, members of her own party, well, she was a Democrat, but members of the Trump, those who are...
That's so funny, Katty. Change your meds. Oh, that's so great. What a great joke. I think you should change your meds. You pharmaceutical taking motherfucker, right?
Normally supportive of the Trump administration, and beyond
these guys are all on meds. They're They're on psychological meds. They're taking Adderall. I mean, they're all like fucking drug addicts, and they don't sleep at night. I mean, the politicians, the media, most of them are taking some kind of fucking bullshit. You know, they're big into pharmaceuticals, and their sponsors are pharmaceutical companies. A lot of these people, they're just so miserable in their lives and their jobs. They're so disconnected from everything, lonely and depressed. These things, they're on these medications. That's why they come off like zombies, right?
The obvious Kremlin sort of shadow here, it's just plain weird.
Yeah, it's pretty weird and very ominous. It went out to 3.5 million followers. I mean, I think I would add, is this the best use of the DNI's time?
Yeah.
This very well produced. I mean, we do television. This is like a kind of mini documentary. But there's something about this kind of anti-elite. You know, we heard it in the attacks on top universities.
It's not about universities. I mean, that's what they say. Here they show the vaporizing everything as its core.
It comes from the kind of populist strain of the Republican Party at the moment, or at least of the White House at the moment. And there's something even stranger, which is this idea that there is some kind of secret cabal that is behind the scenes pulling the strings, and yet we have Donald Trump in the White House.
Okay, so, you know, there is a secret cabal. She makes a good point here.
She's suggesting that even though Donald Trump is president at the moment, there's still actually this kind of...
Exactly, the deep state bullshit. Because Trump is controlled. Like, she has to admit Trump is controlled. Like, this is an excellent point. But you have to admit there's a deep cabal, because there's people with money and power that far exceeds what's going on. And, you know, there's families and institutions that have more power than, you know, an old-time power that, you know, these presidents and these politicians and stars, celebrities don't have. There's a whole nother level of hidden power and money, which you guys would never acknowledge. Catty K.
A group of secret elites that's running things. I mean, that doesn't seem to add up. So the whole thing is pretty
It totally
weird.
adds up. She's just lying about Trump. And when Trump said, what kind of way is this to run the world? Right? What kind of way is this to run the country? When he lost the election to Joe Biden and they was getting shut down at every turn. And he was like, what kind of way is this to run the country? That's why he's trying to grab power. The only reason he has it, because the people who are running the, you know, system know the system has to be taken down. Like, they know that there has to be a new deal, and people aren't going to accept a new deal without a bunch of fucking hardships. Like, you know, you're going to own nothing and love it, was what the World Economic Forum had to say. So
Weird. I agree with the senator. It's kind of odd.
It's kind of odd. It's kind of odd. See, they have these British fuckers that come in here. You know, not just that. They have people from other countries telling Americans what's going on with America, right? You know, they have this. They remember they did this with Piers Morgan, and they have these people, and they just, you know, they sound more intelligent because of the you know, the royal accent. You know, she's one of the elite persons herself, right? I'm sure she comes from old money. So here it is. Catty K's family history and her father's background are mentioned in multiple sources, indicating a potential connection to wealth and influence. While her personal wealth is not specifically detailed, her family background suggests a certain level of privilege and a connection to influential circles. Her father was a British diplomat and her mother was a journalist, according to her LinkedIn profile. That indicates a family with strong career paths in international affairs and media, which often leads to opportunities for advancement to higher earnings. She has a Swiss citizenship, you know, this stuff here. But her father being a diplomat means that he comes from some sort of, you know, like the royal connection. So her father is Swiss, and, you know, these things that they, you know, these other, whatever it is. You can do an AI deep dive. You know, if you pay a little money, it'll do a deep dive. You give a little fucking, throw a little jing, throw a little coin the AI's way. But, you know, you can just see the way she talks. She's well educated, and she talks like someone of those Brit, you know, she's from the aristocracy. And so, you know, it's just all a big fucking mess here.
Okay, so as you can see, you won't see us spinning here on Morning Joe at all.
So I showing you that Morning Joe thing, you know, that meme. That's right after Joe Scarborough kind of rips Joe Biden's debate performance. And they had, you know, they were taint lickers for Joe Biden. You know, there's the Trump taint lickers, and it was bad. Like, it was so greasy. They were the worst, the Morning Joe people. And then she says, you see we're not spinning, but, there's that other meme where, I'm not going to show you that one, where she talks about, Donald Trump thinks it's his job to tell you what to think, and that's our job, that quote. But, these people, she comes from the Brzezinski family. Zabrinski was this, I don't know if I think they might be Polish, I'm not sure what it is. Eastern European, think tank geniuses that created the CFO, Council on Foreign Relations. And they're big into this, they're part of this elite. They're the academic elite, although, Mika and Maureen Joe Scarborough have quite a bit of money from their show. They get paid $8 million a year. They're not, elite, but they're wealthy people. They have some power and influence on their show. And, Katty K comes from this aristocracy, aristocrat type situation. These people are all, Kamala Harris's academic elite. Both of her parents were professors at universities, liberal universities. And so they have this, there's these different levels of elitism and people with money or people with culture. You go talk to these people and they're real arrogant and they're condescending and they pull these experts on, like they show you something. They're like, Katty K, tell us what it's all about. Mike Barnacle, he's a reporter from one of those Boston newspapers, kind of famous. Tell us what it's all about. And they're like these authority figures that come in and they're shills for the controlling system, and maybe they believe it, maybe they don't, doesn't matter. But at some level they know they're lying, right? Pete Hegseth, a moral degenerate, cheated on his wives, cheated with his wife, impregnated a coworker, and then got accused of sexual assault, was showing up to work, breathing out alcohol, drunk. Just a piece of shit. His mom wrote a letter when he was going through a divorce talking about what a piece of shit he was. Then he said he found God, and then he comes out and he lies about all this other bullshit, right? He just lies about all these things. I just saw another piece where the woman was grilling him on all these expenditures. It's costing $40 million for the parade, another $400+ million to refit Trump's airplane. The military parade was 40, and these other things are costing $1 billion for this stuff, like the bombing of Yemen that was a failure, some of these other things, right? And they have to allocate monies from other programs to do these things. And she was asking about it. He wouldn't talk about it. He just gets aggressive and goes back to what a piece of shit Joe Biden was. And he's supposed to be a man of God, right? All these people. And it goes to what I was talking about. This is why I included all these things for people watching the Journey series or watching this on Gratefullness Meditation. And it's kind of what I was saying in the beginning of the, the introduction of this video about that there's a simple thing you can do. And when you start including God's life, you start including God's opinion, your relationship with God, a dialogue with God, God telling you what to do, whatever you want to look at it, and you refine that. It gets refined over time. And the Sahaj Marg system is wonderful at doing that. And, it's something where you plug away. Sometimes the meditations just seem like they're restless. Like, why the fuck am I going through this? And the meditations don't feel good, and they're, difficult. And sometimes it's just boring, and sometimes it's uncomfortable physically. Sometimes it's all those above. Sometimes, like, you're meditating for an hour, and you look at your watch, and it's only been a minute, and you're like, oh, my God, I got to go through another 59 minutes. Some of the meditations are blissful, but, oftentimes there's no real concrete idea of what's happening, but your heart is being worked on, and you're developing these capacities. And then there's just this natural flow that develops over time. And again, it's something that anybody who works at it can get some kind of results where they're, it just has to wear away at it. I mean, depending on your, what you like when you come into the circumstance. But there'll be some way that you'll have a way of communicating with God. I mean, you could always communicate with God. It's really what I'm talking about is receiving, right? This is not about, like, people pray and ask God for things all the time. God knows what you're all about, what you want, right? But what does God need from you? What can you do for God? It's a one-way communication system where people pray and ask God for stuff, and then they don't listen. They don't get the feedback. People think God is there for them, but what is your role in it? What are you doing for God? And really, it's doing work for God, being in service of God is the highest thing. It's the most the most advanced thing. Regardless of how smart you are, what work you do, when you work for God, it is beyond all these other things. All these other things are temporary and they're bound to the planet. Whatever greatness you achieved is bound to a physical reality, where working for God is infinite, and it's part of being a part of the divine plan, and it's what everyone's created for, to whatever capacity. We all have a role to play, and that role changes as we evolve and we move forward. And so this listening to God is like, it just takes a willingness. And you see these fucking people, they're just like, rearranging reality, go out and spit this fucking ridiculous, toxic fucking ghouls, the stuff out of their ghoul holes. It's just, it's an abomination, right? It's grotesque, right? It's fucking grotesque. These people are grotesque, right? That's why I make fun of them and say the things, because, it's not about just the dumb fucks that listen to them, but it's the evil and the grotesque shit they're just spitting out here that, that on some level everyone knows that it's wrong, and, you suffer consequences from it. You don't sleep, you feel guilty, you feel lonely, you worry about the bad things going to happen to you. Like, all these things happen when you're just like diving in and working for evil. And, Trump is a worthless piece of shit, but the other side is, just as bad in the other direction. And they're all running away from the warnings that are there for everyone to see. And we're walking right into this. We're walking right over the cliff, right? We're racing over the cliff in our self-destructive nature. It's just there. And like I said, it just takes a little bit of effort, but I know why people aren't going to do it. Like, I've been through this. I'm supposed to say these things. I was saying earlier that this stuff comes through me. You read a comment or I see something, and I have all these, information that comes through me. And, I have a specific mindset, and I make jokes, and, some of the stuff is, it's me as a conduit having a personality and whatever. But the information flows, and it's just, every day I can produce hours. I can produce 2 hours of content. I can produce 4 or 8 hours of content and just have, after a while I get worn out, I get tired. But the information is like never ending. Like, I don't get writer's block, and, there's just a flow to it. And, it comes from, this practice that I do, the Sahaj Marg Gratefullness meditation practice, but also, willingness to listen to God, right? Like, there's, I have, being a completely incompetent person before I started doing the Sahaj Marg meditation, a total underachiever, someone who was underachieving. I had talents and abilities, but I wasn't putting any of them to use. And I couldn't really function. I could barely do anything. Like, everything stressed me out or whatever. And, I couldn't live a normal life. Like, I was overwhelmed by things, the noise, I could work a job, or I could go do something. I could do like one thing a day. But there are things that would just make me feel like wiped out. And I was physically strong. I was an athlete, and, I was drinking alcohol and using drugs at times, and, just whatever I was doing. But, there was social situations and, things that would just bum me out, would zap me. And I couldn't sustain relationships. I couldn't hold jobs. I couldn't get through college. All these things. And so I was well aware that I wasn't able to do it on my own. And then, with the Sahaj Marg system, I've been able to accomplish all kinds of things and endure all kinds of things that I couldn't have done before. And the Sahaj Marg system helped me connect to the divinity within me. And then the cleaning aspect helped to erode a lot of these, things that were blocking my ability to perform in these different avenues and live a moderately normal life. And so for me, it's been very easy to understand that, without God, like, I suck. Like, I'm not capable of, So, I've had that blessing. It's been a real blessing, because I'm well aware of what me without God is, and it's not great. But, when God is included in my decision making, then I'm capable of so much more. And I know that everyone else is, but it's, hard to convince people because their egos don't want to hear it. And as long as there's these distractions and these things in the system, people aren't going to do it. So, but like I said in the beginning, if everybody did it, the world would be transformed. But, these things are going to have to be taken away for people to get motivated to embrace a relationship where their ego just doesn't go and run amok and make bad decisions, that you have to include God in everything, and even down to the smallest of details. Some American person asked Babaji what he could do. He said, with God's permission, I can spin the universe like a top, but without his permission, I can't even take a sip of water. And so this idea that, even down to the minutest details, God has to be endorsing what you're doing. And I think, when you surrender up to that extent, there's a certain level of freedom that you experience from the consequence of making self-destructive and wrong choices, right? You live a consequence-free life because you're doing what God wants you to do. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramount, definitely pointing for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.